The sole surviving suspected gunman from the 2015 terrorist attacks in Paris has appeared in court at the start of a landmark trial. Salah Abdeslam and 19 others are accused of involvement in the coordinated jihadist attacks that killed 130 people. The former president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, has released a statement apologising for leaving Kabul abruptly as the Taliban took power. He said it was the only way to avoid bloodshed in the city. Large numbers of women have held another protest in Kabul in defiance of the Taliban rulers. It comes a day after the Taliban announced a new interim government with no female representatives. The former head of the biotech company Theranos has gone on trial in the US accused of fraud. Elizabeth Holmes allegedly made huge profits for the company by promoting fake blood testing technology.
In Japan, former Internal Affairs Minister Sanai Takaichi is among the candidates seeking to become prime minister. In Hong Kong, a pro-democracy group says police arrested 4 of its leaders for not cooperating with an investigation into the group's efforts to mark the 1989 crackdown on protesters in Beijing. In Indonesia, the Justice and Human Rights Minister visits a prison near Jakarta where a fire killed 41 and injured 80 others. And in Mexico, no injuries are reported from a powerful earthquake centered in Acapulco that shook the capital, Mexico City.
152,000. That's how many children tested positive for COVID-19 last week. That is the single highest week on record for pediatric infections. And Rose, this, of course, as kids are all heading back to school.
Yeah, very concerning for a lot of parents out there. And Dr. Jen, we're seeing over 150,000 patients hospitalized with COVID. And this is a tough number. Deaths have increased by 34% in just the past 14 days. But you have some information that's potentially life-saving about prevention after exposure.
Yeah, it's prophylaxis with the monoclonal antibody cocktail made by Regeneron. This needs to be on people's radars. So let's go through it. This was authorized by the FDA just in August of this year for prevention after clinical trials showed an 80% reduction in risk of being symptomatically infected after exposure to a known case of COVID-19. So who qualifies for this? Right now, if someone is immune compromised, that's the CDC definition, and has 15 or more minutes within 6 feet of someone who is known COVID positive, and even some people who have been vaccinated may qualify. So this is really important information, and it's just not out there on the level in terms of awareness that it should be. However, there are some qualifiers here. So number one, this is not, and I want to be crystal clear, not a substitute for vaccination. If you're going to get this treatment, timing is critical. It has to be as soon as possible and not after 10 days of that exposure. Right now, it's available in 2 forms, intravenous and subcutaneous injection. So that makes it a little bit easier. And for anyone who wants or needs more information, they can go to combatcovid.hhs.gov. But this awareness needs to increase for sure. This is potentially life-saving information.
All right, Dr. Ashton, thank you for keeping stuff like this on everybody's radar. We appreciate it.
And Dr. Ashish Jha, the Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health. And Dr. Jha, let's sort through some of this right now. We're hearing talk of this 4th wave, but we're really dealing with 2 very different Americas right now. The America where people are vaccinated, the America where people aren't.
Yeah, good morning, George. Thanks for having me here. That's exactly right. And for people who are vaccinated, they may get the infection, they may get a breakthrough, but it's going to be mild. They're not going to end up in the hospital. But for people who are not vaccinated, this is a very, very dangerous moment. People are ending up in hospitals in unprecedented numbers. And kids who are not vaccinated are getting infected largely from the adults in their lives. So we have a lot of work to do to protect kids as well.
And what do you make of this Mu variant we've been hearing talk about?
Yeah, look, there are going to be more variants. I mean, as long as this is a global pandemic and the virus rages around the world, we're going to see new variants. Mu comes from Colombia. We've had Lambda from Peru. We're going to see things like this. I'm not worried right now about the Mu variant. I don't see it displacing Delta because Delta is so contagious. I don't think Mu is going to end up taking a major hold in the U.S., but we've got to watch the data and see where it goes.
So what do we do about this surge among children right now?
Yeah, I mean, there are two things. Certainly for kids 12 and over, they should be getting vaccinated. There is no doubt about that kids will benefit from the vaccine. The question is what to do about kids under 12. And there are two parts of that. You know, as I said earlier, kids get infected from the adults in their lives. That's the major source. If you don't want to get vaccinated for yourself, get vaccinated for your kids. And second, we've got to push the FDA to get kids under 12 vaccinated as soon as that data is available. I don't want bureaucratic slow-ups on that.
A lot of confusion about boosters as well. Who should be getting the booster shot? When can they expect to be able to get it?
Yeah, I think we'll hear more formal guidance from the FDA and CDC on this. I think the science on this really is becoming clear. Vulnerable people, older people, frail people, people with chronic diseases, they should undoubtedly be getting that third shot. The question around young, healthy people getting a third shot, I think that part, at least in my mind, is a bit more open. We'll see where the FDA and CDC land on this as well.
Dr. Jha, thanks as always for your time and your information.
We begin here in Japan, where the government plans to extend the coronavirus state of emergency in most areas until the end of September. The declaration will remain in place in 19 prefectures, including Tokyo and Osaka. The state of emergency is currently in effect for 21 prefectures, and quasi-emergency measures are in place in 12 others. They were all set to expire on Sunday. But the government is likely to announce 19 prefectures will still be subject to the state of emergency. 8 others will be under quasi-emergency restrictions. Officials will lift the measures for 6 prefectures. The government plans to discuss the move with its expert panel on Thursday and make an official decision. Now, Tokyo reported 1,834 new cases on Wednesday. That's down about 1,300 from the same day last week. Osaka reported more than 2,000 new infections. Its governor also revealed the first teenager to die from the coronavirus in Japan. The young man was taken to a hospital on September 1st. He had not been vaccinated and had an underlying health condition. Across Japan, health authorities reported more than 12,000 new infections on Wednesday. The number of seriously ill people is more than 2,200. 89 more people have died. Now, to the vote that'll effectively determine Japan's next prime minister. 2 candidates have officially announced they'll run for the leadership of Japan's main ruling Liberal Democratic Party. The latest is former Internal Affairs Minister Takaichi Sanae.
I think the ultimate mission of a government is to protect the lives and property of its citizens, as well as the territorial lands, waters, airspace, resources, sovereignty, and honor of the nation.
Takaichi is backed by LDP heavyweight, former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. They share many of the same conservative views. She outlined her economic policy, dubbing it Sanaenomics. She says it's a plan to rebuild and grow the economy. Former Foreign Minister Kishida Fumio is another candidate and has already been campaigning for 2 weeks. He also laid out his economic policies, including a massive fund to boost Japan's competitiveness in the fields of science and technology.
The gap between the rich and the poor has now widened in Japan amid the coronavirus pandemic. Our most important task is to raise income of a wide range of people.
Kono Taro, the minister in charge of the vaccine rollout, is also preparing to run. He met with former Prime Minister Abe on Wednesday and likely discussed his election pledges. Another possible contender is former Defense Minister Ishiba Shigeru. He's run for leader 4 times in the past. Ishiba says he'll decide after discussing the matter with each member of his political faction. And finally, former Internal Affairs Minister Noda Seiko wants to run. She's been struggling to secure the backing of 20 party members, which is required to enter the race. The campaign is scheduled to officially kick off on September 17th. The new leader will be announced on the 29th. Police in Hong Kong have arrested 4 members of a pro-democracy group that have been organizing annual vigils for victims of the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. Police on Wednesday announced the arrest of senior members of the Hong Kong Alliance in support of Patriotic Democratic Movements of China. Its vice chair, Chow Hang-tung, was among the four. The police say the group failed to provide information they had requested by their deadline on Tuesday. They say its failure to comply violated the national security law. The group's leaders, including Lee Chuk-yan, are already in jail for organizing unauthorized rallies. The police had asked the alliance to provide information on its members and activities. They said the information was necessary to prevent the group from conspiring with foreign forces and threatening national security. Chow and the others went to police headquarters on Tuesday, but refused to provide the information. The alliance was banned from holding its Tiananmen vigils for the past 2 years. It appears to be set to join the list of pro-democracy unions and protest organizers in Hong Kong that have been forced to disband. Myanmar's military has denounced the call by the pro-democracy National Unity government for a nationwide uprising against the junta, saying any such attempt would fail. NUG acting president Dua Lashila called for revolt in an online video on Tuesday, blaming the military for the ongoing detention, torture, and killing of dissidents.
We see that the National Unity government has released a statement. In the meantime, the media are reporting where fighting is taking place, which has resulted in panic buying for food supplies.
State-run media report the NUG merely wants to show it's done something ahead of the UN General Assembly later this month. In the city of Yangon, people have been rushing to buy essentials, including food and medicine, at supermarkets. This comes after Dua Lashila called on people in the video to stock up on necessities and avoid going outside for non-essential purposes. He also urged the People's Defense Force, made up of armed civilians, along with ethnic militias, to attack the military. Attacks by dissidents against the military have continued around the country for months. Local media report there were several attacks by the People's Defense Force on Tuesday. In other news, 2 more victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks have been identified just ahead of the 20th anniversary of the tragedy. The New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner said on Tuesday it's identified 2 people who died in the World Trade Center through DNA analysis of their remains. They were the first victims of the attack identified since October 2019. On September 11, 2001, hijackers flew 2 planes into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center complex in Manhattan. Another plane struck the U.S. Defense Department headquarters near Washington, D.C. A 4th plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. The coordinated attacks killed nearly 3,000 people. 2,753 of them were in the World Trade Center. About 40% of those who died are still unidentified because their remains were severely damaged. The chief medical examiner said no matter how much time has passed since the tragedy, it'll never be forgotten. She pledged to make sure all those who were lost are identified and reunited with their families. Shifting now to the weather, a powerful typhoon is setting its sights on Taiwan and the southern islands of Japan. Our meteorologist Jonathan Oh has the forecast for there and elsewhere in our World Weather Report.
Hello, we're still keeping an eye out on a couple of storms over the western Pacific. Chanthu is a very strong typhoon that's continuing to move toward the north and west, and Khansen has been battering the Philippines over the past couple of days, not expected to move over toward the north and west, and likely to intensify as it moves toward the general location of southern China and into Southeast Asia. So be on the lookout for that. And Chanthu likely to be moving to the north and west and maybe making more toward the northerly turn toward the southeastern areas of China and into Taiwan as well. Across Japan, it's going to be a little bit of an unstable day on Thursday when it comes to rain and thunderstorms for the eastern side of the country, from Tokyo into Niigata, Sapporo, looking at some wet weather coming up on Thursday. A little on the drier side back toward the west. As we take a look at what's happening across North America, there is a really well-developed low-pressure system that's intensifying. You can see the clouds just really billowing up along this cold front. As we go throughout the day on Wednesday, looking at the possibility of strong to even severe thunderstorms, places like New York does not need additional rainfall for the moment, but there's a potential for some flash flooding as we have a low rolling through. Looking at that rain to continue into Thursday as well, with a high of 26 in New York for the day. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.